Good afternoon. This is Diane Businda, and I'm here this afternoon to talk to you about interpersonal communication and what I've learned through the class about interpersonal communication. I hope that everyone is having a wonderful weekend, and if you are a mother, happy Mother's Day on this beautiful Sunday. Very quickly, if you'll follow with me here on the outline from the PowerPoint presentation, I'd like to just touch on the agenda. So very briefly, we're going to discuss the definition of interpersonal communication and what it means to enlarge the conversation. We're going to talk about what I discovered as my overarching goal. We're going to discuss my background in behavioral blend and how that background in behavioral blend influenced the conversations that I have today with everyone from work, family, friends, colleagues, neighbors. We're also going to touch briefly on the barriers that I discovered about my own interpersonal context and how to have come to some solutions when you're looking at noise pollution, which can be internal or external. And last but not least, we're going to look at the most important thing, which is what is the action plan that I'm going to use and try to follow as I move forward. So if you'll follow with me here, and I promise I'm not going to kill you by PowerPoint presentation. I hope I can speak more to the slides than I can having you read them. So if you'll follow along with me, let's look first and foremost at the definition of interpersonal communication and what that means to enlarging the conversation. John Stewart states it very well in his book, Bridges Without Walls, that interpersonal communication is a type of communication that happens when people involved talk and listen in ways that maximize the presence of the personal. He states that at its simplest form, it is the opposite of impersonal communication. Its conversations are like inhaling and exhaling, and we're taking in information and we're giving out information. And all of that is based on our beliefs, our values, how we grew up, the experiences that we've had in life, and how all of those things combine together to create who we are today and how we maneuver in a relationship and what roles we take on. When you're talking about enlarging the conversation, the best definition I came to was by an author who happens to be a life coach, and her last name is Reynolds Mead. And she basically put it this way: communication has the ingredients such as empathetic listening and nonverbal cues, having self-disclosure, and most importantly, that in our conversations, if we're trying to enlarge them, we are living our lives in a way that is very genuine and an authentic state, which means our conversations need to be genuine and authentic. If you'll follow me to the next slide, we're going to talk about what my overarching goal is. My overarching goal is that I have to continue to work on my listening skills. That came out loud and clear through this class to me. And I really thought I was a good listener, so this was quite an eye-opener for me, and one that I very much appreciate I have learned. And what I mean by that, probably the biggest overarching goal for me that I'm going to have to work on is when I'm having a discussion with somebody else and they're talking, not to be listening to them in the way that I'm being judgmental or critical and trying to find, I'm rehearsing what I'm going to say back to them and formulating my response. And, I'm picking through there to go, what can I pick apart and give them what can I give them some advice on? So when you do that, unfortunately, Burley Allen tells us that we're working in an area called I'm okay, but you're not. If I'm trying to fix those conversations, and instead of truly, deeply listening to those folks, I am picking that conversation apart and looking at my own agenda, then I'm saying to them, I'm okay because I'm going to pick this apart and give you some advice, but you're really not. And I will tell you that as a Christian woman, that is not really the message I want to convey to those that I am speaking with. So as we move forward, what ingredients contribute to that overarching goal and the one that I feel like I have to work on? Well, let's take a brief look at my background. I came from a two-parent loving family, but I grew up as a single mother of two children. I was single when my children were very young. So all of their lives, I've juggled raising my children and having 2 jobs, at sometimes 3 jobs, and you know, just really having set up a very task-oriented situation, whether I wanted to or not. I was a business owner. I homeschooled my children. I'm very independent, strong-willed, and competitive. And my behavioral blend would also lead me to believe that part of that, and the way I look at conversations, is based not only on my background, but I am very task-oriented. I'm very achievement-oriented, but I'm also a perfectionist, and I get a lot of pleasure out of completing tasks on my own. I don't necessarily have to make the most money or be the most popular, but I like that sense of accomplishment. So I like to take on those personal projects where I can come away and have something that I've done that I really feel good about. And because of that, and I've done a lot of it on my own, I think it lends me to going back to my overarching goal that I tend to be judgmental, to think, if I can do it, anybody can do it, which is really not fair to the person I'm in a conversation with, right? So as we continue, let's look at some of the positive and negative influences on my conversations. When you're a person who wants to get things done in a timely manner, which can be very good, I have a passion to serve, and I really want to gain knowledge and wisdom. I am a very loyal person. I enjoy serving others and being a peacemaker, and I really adjust well to other circumstances. On the flip side of that, some of the negative things that come out in conversations or that influence my conversations is, again, being judgmental or critical. You know, leaning toward that personal achievement sometimes puts me in a situation where I want to work in kind of my own silo instead of with the whole group. And at times I can be a hermit. I'm very task-oriented, and although I love people and I want to serve them, and I do that in my job every day, all week long, when I get home, I tend to want to turn it off and climb into my shell, which is not always good for those personal communications, as you can certainly understand. Potential barriers in my interpersonal context, again, is not anything that we haven't discussed already. I always kind of want to get the upper hand in the conversation by exposing their weaknesses or telling them how they can do things better or picking that conversation apart. I really need to work on, as Stewart says, being mindful of what nexting is, which he defines as something helpful next. And that would lead me into, you know, noise pollution and what that means. Noise pollution is not as we think the pollution that's floating around in the air, but it's internal and external. And the internal noise that I hear is that I'm a dependent listener. I find myself really trying to figure out what my role in that conversation is and how I'm going to help them or tell them to do something better. I'm also a somatic, sometimes work in the somatic barrier, which means I sift through those experiences and beliefs that I've had in the past and bring them forward to the front. And what I really want to work on, and one of my goals, is that I am certainly working for God to expose why He wants me to have that conversation with that person. And of course, when you're looking at the external circumstances, I don't feel like that's as much a barrier for me as it is the internal. I think I have to make sure I'm in a good, quiet place because I do get distracted easily. I want to take the last couple of minutes to look straight at my action plan. And one of the biggest things I'm going to work on certainly is my listening skills. I want to use the talker listener card. I think that's a wonderful tool, as Patterson describes in his book. And I want to make sure that, as I saw in the movie Fireproof, that I don't go down that degenerative communication spiral as we saw between that married couple. I want others to hold me accountable. And through all that, the most important thing for me is not only to be humble, but to live as Alan Carr in his sermon wrote, the evidence of a spirit-filled life. I want to communicate with others, being able to encourage them, edify them, and exalt them, and work to embrace them in the way that God has wanted me to as His servant. To love them, to have those conversations where they walk away feeling better than they did when we started the conversation. I've certainly enjoyed talking to you this afternoon. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week. I have thoroughly enjoyed this class and would recommend it to anybody and everyone. I think outside of a college degree, this would be a wonderful class for everyone to take, to learn to have better interpersonal communication and enlarge their own conversations. Have a blessed week.